I am Maya Rodriguez, 29 years old, and a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital for the past 4 years. Despite the crushing hours and emotional weight of operating on children, I have never questioned my calling to save young lives. My younger sister Carmen married into the prestigious Wellington family 18 months ago, and they invited me to their annual charity gala. I never expected to discover that Carmen had been telling them I cleaned houses for a living. Little did I know that night would expose a betrayal that cut deeper than any scalpel. If you are watching this after another exhausting day, please give this video a like and subscribe to hear how I confronted family deception when it mattered most. Growing up in East LA, Carmen and I were inseparable despite our 3-year age gap. As the older sister, I naturally became her protector, defending her from playground bullies and helping her navigate the complexities of adolescence. Our parents, Miguel and Rosa Rodriguez, worked tirelessly to provide for us. Papa was a mechanic, who also drove for a rideshare service on weekends, while Mama worked as a seamstress during the day and cleaned offices at night. They taught us that education was our ticket to a better life and that no honest work was ever beneath anyone's dignity. From childhood, Carmen and I walked different paths. I was the studious one, spending hours with textbooks while she preferred socializing and dreaming about glamorous futures. I worked part-time jobs throughout high school to save for college, while Carmen focused on her appearance and social connections. Despite our differences, we supported each other completely. I helped her with homework while she taught me how to be more confident in social situations. When I left for Stanford on a pre-med scholarship, Carmen would call nightly for advice about everything from college applications to relationship drama. My journey to becoming a pediatric surgeon was grueling. 4 years at Stanford, 4 years of medical school at UCLA, 5 years of general surgery residency, and 2 additional years of pediatric surgery fellowship. The training was brutal. 80-hour weeks, life and death decisions, and constant pressure to be perfect. I sacrificed social life, relationships, and personal comfort for my dream of healing children. The day I received my board certification and joined Seattle Children's Hospital as an attending pediatric surgeon, I felt the weight of every sacrifice validated. At 29, I was one of the youngest attending pediatric surgeons on the West Coast, specializing in complex congenital heart defects. My days began before dawn and often ended after midnight, but each successful surgery reminded me why I had chosen this path. Last month alone, I had performed 3 life-saving heart repairs on infants, each operation lasting up to 12 hours. The financial compensation was excellent, but that had never been my motivation. Saving children's lives was priceless. While I was buried in medical training, Carmen pursued a different dream. She attended UCLA and majored in communications, but her real focus was on meeting the right people. She had an innate ability to charm her way into exclusive social circles, and quickly became known for dating wealthy fraternity members. Carmen often joked that she was working toward her Mrs. degree, though she did graduate with respectable grades. Carmen met Jonathan Wellington at a charity auction in Beverly Hills 2 years ago. She had been invited as a +1 by her roommate, who worked for an event planning company. Jonathan, heir to the Wellington pharmaceutical fortune, was immediately captivated by her beauty and vivacious personality. The Wellington family had built their empire over 4 generations, starting with Jonathan's great-grandfather's small pharmacy and growing into a multinational pharmaceutical corporation worth billions. The Wellingtons were old money with all the expectations that entailed. Jonathan's mother, Victoria Wellington, came from Boston blue blood and had been raised with rigid ideas about propriety and social standing. His father, Charles Wellington, while more self-made in temperament, had fully embraced the elite lifestyle his success afforded. They lived in a Malibu estate, owned properties across 3 countries, and were fixtures in high society charity circuits. Their engagement after 8 months of dating was featured in Town and Country magazine. The wedding ceremony at the Wellington estate was attended by 500 guests, including several celebrities and political figures. I was maid of honor naturally, though I felt completely out of place among the wealthy guests discussing their Hamptons houses and European vacations. After the wedding, my relationship with Carmen began to shift subtly. Our weekly phone calls became monthly check-ins. When we did speak, she filled our conversations with stories about charity committee meetings, exclusive restaurant openings, and shopping trips to Milan. Whenever I tried to share stories about my surgical cases or the hospital, she would seem distracted and quickly change the subject. I attributed this to her excitement about her new life rather than any deeper issue. The Wellington family had particular expectations for their daughter-in-law. Victoria Wellington was known for her perfectionist standards and her belief that the Wellington name carried significant social responsibilities. She had been quoted in society magazines discussing the importance of maintaining appropriate standards and associating with people of similar backgrounds and values. Charles Wellington, while somewhat more approachable than his wife, had built the family business through careful attention to image and reputation. Both parents made it clear that Carmen's behavior and associations would reflect on the entire Wellington family legacy. During the few family gatherings I had attended, I noticed how the Wellingtons spoke dismissively about certain professions and social classes. Victoria once mentioned that she simply could not understand why anyone would choose careers in service industries when proper education opens so many better doors. Charles frequently made comments about the importance of surrounding ourselves with successful people and maintaining the right connections. As months passed after Carmen's wedding, I began to notice changes in my sister. Her accent softened, losing some of its East LA edges. Her clothing became exclusively designer brands, and she started dropping names of celebrities and socialites as if they were close friends. The sister I had grown up with seemed to be disappearing into a carefully constructed new identity. The phone call that would change everything came on a Thursday evening in October. I was just finishing my notes after a 14-hour surgery day when Carmen's name appeared on my phone screen. "Maya, hi, how are you doing?" Her voice had that artificial brightness that immediately put me on alert. Tired but good. "Just finished a complex surgery on a 3-month-old with tetralogy of Fallot. How are things with you?" "Oh, that's nice. Listen, I have something exciting to tell you. Victoria and Charles are hosting their annual charity gala this Saturday, and they specifically requested that you attend." I nearly dropped my phone. In the 18 months since Carmen's wedding, her in-laws had shown minimal interest in including me in their social events. They want me at their gala? Why now? Well, they're curious about you, and Jonathan thought it would be nice for our families to get closer. It's a really important event, Maya. They're raising money for children's cancer research, and there will be some very influential people there. The emphasis she placed on important and influential felt pointed, but I pushed down my suspicions. What time should I be there? Cocktails start at 7. The address is 1247 Ocean Vista Drive in Malibu. And Maya, her voice dropped nervously, could you maybe wear something elegant? Like that black dress you wore to my engagement party? And perhaps just keep conversation. Light if people ask about work? Red flags immediately went up, but I agreed anyway. Sure, Val, I'll see what I can find to wear. Perfect. Oh, and maybe bring a nice bottle of champagne. Something French if possible. After hanging up, I sat puzzling over the strange conversation. Carmen had never been one to hide her feelings, and she was clearly anxious about this event. But why? The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. I had to arrange coverage for my weekend on-call duties, which meant calling in favors from colleagues. Finding appropriate attire proved challenging since my wardrobe consisted mainly of scrubs, professional suits for medical conferences, and casual clothes for my limited free time. I spent my lunch break Friday shopping for a dress that would meet Carmen's standards without decimating my budget. The black cocktail dress I eventually chose cost more than I typically spent on clothing in 6 months, but I reminded myself this was a rare expense. The French champagne recommendation led me to a wine shop where the sommelier helped me select a bottle that would be appropriate for such an occasion, though the price made me cringe. Saturday afternoon brought an emergency at the hospital. A 7-year-old had been rushed in after a car accident with internal injuries requiring immediate surgery. The operation was successful, but it lasted 4 hours, putting me behind schedule for the gala. I barely had time to shower, change into my dress, and drive to Malibu. The Wellington estate was even more impressive than I had imagined. The sprawling property overlooked the Pacific Ocean, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway filled with luxury vehicles. Valet attendants in formal uniforms directed traffic while guests in elegant evening wear walked toward the mansion's entrance. I felt underdressed despite my expensive new dress as I approached the front door. Women around me wore gowns that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, adorned with jewelry that sparkled under the outdoor lighting. Men were uniformly dressed in perfectly tailored tuxedos, many sporting watches that could fund a college education. Inside, the mansion was transformed for the gala. Crystal chandeliers illuminated rooms filled with elaborate floral arrangements, while staff in formal uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. The guest list appeared to include celebrities, politicians, and business leaders whose faces I recognized from magazines and news programs. Carmen spotted me immediately and rushed over, looking stunning in a designer gown that probably cost more than I made in a week. Her smile seemed forced as she air-kissed my cheek. "Maya, you made it. You look nice." Her tone suggested I had barely met some minimum standard. "Thank you. The house is incredible. Isn't it? Come, I want you to meet some people." Carmen immediately followed me to a quieter corner of the terrace overlooking the ocean. Other guests were scattered around, but we found a relatively private spot near a fountain. "Maya, I can explain. You told them I clean houses for a living?" I kept my voice low but couldn't hide my shock and hurt. "It's not that simple. Please, let me explain. When I just spent 14 hours yesterday performing heart surgery on a baby, you're telling people I scrub toilets? You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Victoria has these expectations. Expectations that don't include having a pediatric surgeon for a sister-in-law." Carmen's eyes filled with tears, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "You don't know what it's like living in their world. Everything is about image and connections. Victoria makes these comments about people in certain professions, about how some careers are more suitable for their social circle." I stared at my sister, trying to process what she was telling me. "So you decided my career wasn't suitable?" I panicked. "When they first asked about you, I mentioned that you worked in healthcare, and Victoria immediately started talking about how wonderful doctors are, how respectable medicine is. But then she asked what kind of doctor, and when I said pediatric surgeon, Charles made this comment about how intense and demanding surgery must be, how it probably doesn't leave much time for proper social engagement. And that led you to house cleaning?" I got flustered and just said you worked with families helping maintain their homes. It seemed safer, less complicated. I never meant for it to go this far. I felt like I was seeing my sister clearly for the first time in months. "How far has it gone, Carmen? How many people think I scrub floors for a living while I'm actually saving children's lives?" She wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to ruin her makeup further. "Not many. Just Victoria and Charles and maybe a few close family friends they might have mentioned it to." "This is unbelievable. Do you have any idea how insulting this is? Not just to me, but to everyone who actually does clean houses for a living?" "There's nothing shameful about that work, but lying about what I do is shameful." I know. I've been trying to figure out how to correct it, but every time I thought about telling them the truth, I imagined how angry they'd be that I lied." Before I could respond, Jonathan Wellington appeared beside us, looking concerned. "Everything all right out here?" "You both look upset." I looked at my sister's husband, this man who seemed decent enough but had clearly never questioned his family's values or his wife's deceptions. "Jonathan, what do you know about what I do for a living?" He looked confused. "You clean houses, right? Carmen says you work incredibly hard, that you're very dedicated to your clients." Carmen made a small, desperate sound beside me, but I was beyond caring about her discomfort. She led me through crowds of elegantly dressed guests toward a group gathered near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. I recognized Victoria and Charles Wellington from the wedding, though they looked even more imposing in their formal attire. "Victoria, Charles, you remember my sister Maya," Carmen said, her voice tight with nervous energy. Victoria Wellington was an imposing woman in her early 60s, with perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of bone structure that suggested good breeding and possible cosmetic enhancement. Her dress was undoubtedly couture, and her jewelry looked like it belonged in a museum. "Of course, Maya. How lovely that you could join us tonight." Her smile was practiced, but didn't reach her eyes. "Carmen tells us you work so hard, barely have time for social events." Thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful, and this is clearly a wonderful cause. Charles Wellington approached with a firm handshake. He was distinguished, looking with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding attention and respect. Maya, welcome. We hear you're quite dedicated to your work. Carmen mentioned you clean houses throughout the city? My blood froze. I'm sorry, what? Carmen's face went pale beside me, but Charles continued cheerfully. Your house cleaning business. Carmen says you work incredibly hard, sometimes 12 hours a day. Such dedication to helping families maintain their homes. The world seemed to tilt around me. House cleaning business? I looked at Carmen, who was staring at the floor, her face flushed with embarrassment and panic. I think there might be some confusion, I said carefully, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I don't clean houses. Victoria looked puzzled, then turned to Carmen. Didn't you tell us Maya runs a residential cleaning service? That she works such long hours because she services multiple homes each day? Carmen opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence stretched uncomfortably as other guests began to notice our conversation. Charles laughed nervously. Well, whatever you do, we're delighted you could join us tonight. Carmen has told us so much about how hard you work. I needed answers. Immediately, but this was neither the time nor place. Thank you again for having me. If you'll excuse me, I'd like to get some air. I don't clean houses, Jonathan. I'm a pediatric surgeon at Seattle Children's Hospital. I perform heart surgery on infants and children. His expression shifted from confusion to shock. A surgeon? But Carmen said... Carmen lied. I turned to face my sister directly. She's been lying to your entire family about who I am and what I do, because apparently being a doctor isn't prestigious enough for the Wellington family standards. Jonathan looked between us, clearly struggling to understand. Carmen, why would you lie about something like this? Before she could answer, Charles Wellington approached our group, having noticed the intense conversation. Is everything all right? You all look quite serious. This was it. The moment of truth that would either clear the air or destroy my relationship with my sister forever. I straightened my shoulders and looked Charles directly in the eyes. Mr. Wellington, I need to clarify something. I don't clean houses. I'm a pediatric surgeon. Charles blinked several times as if processing foreign language. A surgeon? But Carmen specifically told us about your cleaning business. Carmen was mistaken. I kept my voice calm and professional. I specialize in pediatric cardiac surgery at Seattle Children's Hospital. Yesterday, I spent 14 hours repairing a congenital heart defect in a 3-month-old baby. Last week, I performed surgery on a 7-year-old with a rare cardiac tumor. I completed my residency in general surgery, followed by a fellowship in pediatric surgery. I'm board certified and have been practicing for 4 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles stared at me with growing amazement while Jonathan looked at Carmen with confusion and disappointment. A pediatric cardiac surgeon, Charles repeated slowly. And you're how old? 29. Remarkable. His expression shifted to something approaching respect. That level of specialization at your age is quite impressive. Carmen finally found her voice. I can explain. No. Need for explanations right now, I interrupted. I think I should probably leave. This has been illuminating. Charles stepped forward. Please don't leave on our account. If anything, we'd be honored to have a pediatric surgeon as our guest. Victoria will be fascinated when I tell her. She serves on the board of Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. The irony was not lost on me. Thank you, but I think it's best if I go. As I walked back through the mansion toward the exit, I could hear raised voices from the terrace behind me. Carmen and Jonathan were clearly having an intense discussion, while Charles was probably trying to process how he had been so thoroughly deceived about his daughter-in-law's family. The valet retrieved my car quickly, perhaps sensing my urgency, to leave. As I drove down the winding coastal highway back toward the city, my phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from Carmen. I ignored them all, needing time to process what had just happened. Back in my modest apartment, I sat still, wearing my expensive dress, trying to understand how my relationship with my sister had deteriorated to this point. The woman I had protected and supported throughout our childhood had been so ashamed of my career that she had invented an entirely different identity for me. The pain was profound, not just because she had lied, but because she had obviously considered my life's work less valuable than manual labor. There was nothing wrong with cleaning houses. It was honest, necessary work. But the fact that she thought it was a step down from being a surgeon revealed how completely she had absorbed the Wellington family's value system. Sleep was impossible that night. I replayed conversations and moments from the past months, wondering how many times Carmen had perpetuated this lie, how many people believed her story. Had she told our parents? Our cousins? The thought made me sick. Sunday morning brought no relief, only the harsh reality of returning to work with this betrayal weighing on my heart. I had scheduled surgeries that week, lives that depended on my focus and skill. Personal drama had no place in the operating room, so I compartmentalized the pain and threw myself into my work. Carmen called 17 times on Sunday. I let every call go to voicemail, but finally listened to her messages Sunday evening. Maya, please call me back. I know you're angry, but please let me explain properly. I've ruined everything. Jonathan is barely speaking to me. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that. I was just so scared of not fitting in. Please, Maya. You're my sister. We can work through this. On Monday, I received an unexpected call at the hospital. Charles Wellington's assistant was requesting a meeting to discuss a potential consulting opportunity. I declined politely, not ready to engage with that family in any capacity. Tuesday brought flowers to my office, an elaborate arrangement from Carmen with a note begging for forgiveness. I asked my assistant to donate them to the pediatric ward where they might bring joy to sick children rather than remind me of betrayal. Wednesday evening, I finally answered one of Carmen's calls. "Thank you for picking up," she said immediately, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'm listening. Can we meet, face to face? I need you to understand what happened." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee Thursday evening at a neutral location. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived, finding Carmen already there in a corner booth. She looked terrible, pale, exhausted, with none of her usual polish. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the fact that she had been crying for days. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "Talk." Carmen took a shaky breath. When I first started dating Jonathan, everything felt like a fairy tale, but meeting his parents was terrifying. They have these incredibly high standards for everything: education, career, social connections, even table manners. At dinner, Victoria would quiz me about art and literature, testing whether I belonged in their world. And you decided I didn't meet their standards? Not exactly. When they asked about my family, I told them about Papa's auto shop and Mama's sewing. Victoria got this look on her face, this barely concealed disdain. She made some comment about how charming it was that I came from such a working-class background. I waited for her to continue, noting how she had adopted the Wellington family's vocabulary. When they asked about you, I was already nervous. I mentioned you were in medicine, and they seemed impressed. But then Charles asked what type of medicine, and when I said pediatric surgery, Victoria immediately started talking about how demanding surgery must be, how it probably doesn't allow for much social life or cultural engagement. She wondered, aloud, whether surgical training adequately prepares doctors for refined society. So you panicked and lied. I got flustered and said you worked with families helping maintain their households. It seemed like a safer answer that wouldn't provoke any judgment. And it never occurred to you to simply tell them that your sister saves children's lives for a living? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was so scared of them disapproving of me, of Jonathan's family thinking I wasn't good enough. I thought, if I could just get them to accept me first, I could gradually reveal the truth later. But you didn't. Every time I tried, the lie had grown bigger. They started talking about finding you better employment, maybe setting you up with a position at one of their companies. I got trapped in the deception. I studied my sister's face, seeing glimpses of the insecure girl I had grown up with beneath the polished exterior she had cultivated. Do you understand how insulting this is, Carmen? Not just to me, but to every principle our parents taught us about the dignity of all honest work? I know. I've betrayed everything we were raised to believe. What does Jonathan think about all this? He's horrified. Not just about the lying, but about what it reveals about my character. We've had some very difficult conversations about values and authenticity. And his parents? Charles called Sunday morning. He was actually apologetic about how they had treated the subject of your career. Apparently, Victoria does extensive charity work with children's hospitals and was mortified to learn she had been dismissive of a pediatric surgeon. This surprised me. Really? Victoria wants to meet with you. She's apparently been involved with funding pediatric cardiac research and would like to discuss potential collaboration. The irony was almost amusing. The very career Carmen had hidden from them turned out to be something they would have valued highly. What happens now, Carmen? I don't know. Jonathan and I are in counseling. He's made it clear that our marriage can only work if I'm willing to be authentic about who I am and where I come from. No more lies, no more pretending to be someone else. I considered her words carefully. And are you willing to do that? I want to be. This whole experience has shown me how far I've drifted from the person I used to be. I almost lost my sister, and I might still lose my husband, all because I was too insecure to stand by my own family. We talked for another hour, more honestly than we had in months. Carmen told me about the pressure she felt to constantly prove herself worthy of the Wellington name, while I shared how hurt I had been by her apparent lack of interest in my work. I want to make this right, she said as we prepared to leave. However long it takes. It will take time, I acknowledged. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Over the following weeks, Carmen began making amends. She called Victoria and Charles to formally apologize for the deception and to provide accurate information about my career. She reached out to our parents and extended family to ensure no one else had been told false information about my work. Most significantly, she started volunteering at a children's hospital, working directly with families of pediatric patients. The work was emotionally challenging and far removed from her previous charitable activities, but it gave her a new perspective on the importance of medical care. Jonathan supported her efforts at redemption while maintaining clear boundaries about honesty and authenticity in their relationship. Their marriage counselor apparently helped them work through the underlying issues of insecurity and social pressure that had led to the deception. A month after the gala incident, I received a formal invitation to speak at a fundraising event that Victoria Wellington was organizing for pediatric cardiac research. The invitation included a personal note apologizing for any previous misunderstandings and expressing genuine interest in supporting my work. Carmen called to ask if I would attend the event. Victoria specifically requested that you speak about your surgical cases and research. She wants people to understand the complexity and importance of pediatric cardiac surgery. I agreed, partly out of professional obligation and partly out of curiosity about how the Wellington family would handle this reversal. The fundraising luncheon was held at an exclusive country club with about 50 wealthy donors in attendance. Victoria introduced me with genuine enthusiasm, describing my qualifications and accomplishments accurately and impressively. My presentation about congenital heart defects and surgical interventions was well received, with several attendees asking thoughtful questions about funding needs and research opportunities. By the end of the event, I had several commitments for equipment donations and research grants. Carmen stayed close throughout the event, proudly introducing me to various attendees and accurately describing my work. There was no trace of the embarrassment or discomfort she had previously shown when discussing my career. During the drive home, Carmen asked, "How did that feel?" "Strange, but good. Your mother-in-law is actually quite knowledgeable about pediatric medicine. She's been educating herself since learning about your career. I think she was genuinely embarrassed about her initial assumptions." "And you? How do you feel about having a surgeon for a sister now?" Carmen smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Proud. Incredibly proud. I forgot that feeling, but it's coming back." Our relationship continued to heal gradually over the following months. Carmen made consistent efforts to understand my work, even attending a medical conference where I was presenting research. She started each conversation by asking about my recent cases, showing genuine interest in the children I treated. The Wellington family dynamics also shifted significantly. Charles and Victoria began including me in family gatherings not as Carmen's sister who needed to be tolerated, but as a professional whose work they genuinely respected. Victoria even arranged for me to consult on medical storylines for a documentary her foundation was funding. Most importantly, Carmen seemed to rediscover her authentic self. She maintained her polished appearance and social grace, but stopped, pretending to be someone she wasn't. She spoke proudly about our parents' blue-collar backgrounds and began bringing elements of our culture into her interactions with the Wellington family. The annual charity gala the following year was a completely different experience. This time, Carmen introduced me as her sister, the pediatric cardiac surgeon, to everyone we met. I wore my confidence as comfortably as my evening gown, speaking openly about my work with anyone who expressed interest. During the evening, an older gentleman approached me with a warm smile. "Dr. Rodriguez? I'm James Morrison from the Morrison Foundation. We fund pediatric medical research, and Victoria Wellington has told me remarkable things about your work." The conversation that followed led to a significant research grant that would fund my studies on minimally invasive surgical techniques for infant heart repair. Later that evening, as guests mingled on the terrace overlooking the Pacific, Carmen and I found ourselves alone for a moment. "Last year feels like a different lifetime," she reflected. "In many ways it was. We're both different people now." "Do you forgive me?" "Truly?" I considered her question carefully. The hurt had not completely disappeared, but it had transformed into something more manageable. "I forgive you, Carmen. More importantly, I respect who you're becoming." She squeezed my hand gratefully. "Thank you for not giving up on me." As the evening wound down, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been transformative. Carmen had learned the cost of denying her authentic self, while I had gained a deeper appreciation for the courage required to be truthful in all circumstances. The pediatric surgery I performed each day required precision, dedication, and unwavering focus on what truly mattered: saving lives. Personal relationships, I had learned, required similar qualities. Truth, authenticity, and mutual respect were not optional elements but fundamental requirements for any relationship worth preserving. Standing in that opulent setting, surrounded by wealth and status symbols, I felt completely comfortable in my own skin. Not because I had learned to fit into their world, but because I had remained firmly rooted in my own values and identity. Carmen had learned to find her place in the Wellington family not by hiding who she was, but by bringing her authentic self to their world. The result was a richer, more genuine integration of our backgrounds with their lifestyle. In the end, the truth had not diminished either of our standings in that rarefied social circle. If anything, authenticity had elevated both of our positions by demonstrating the strength of character that comes from refusing to compromise fundamental values. The little girl inside me who had once defended her sister on the playground had evolved into a woman who could stand up for truth and dignity even in the most intimidating social circumstances. And the sister who had temporarily lost her way had found the courage to reclaim her authentic self. As we said goodnight to the Wellington family that evening, Victoria pulled me aside. "Maya, I hope you know how much we value having you in our family. Your work is truly inspiring." "Thank you, Victoria. I appreciate your support of pediatric medicine." It's not just professional admiration. Watching Carmen grow more confident and authentic over these past months, largely because of your example, has been remarkable. You've both taught us something valuable about the importance of being genuine. Driving home that night, I thought about the children who would benefit from the research funding I had secured that evening. Their lives would be improved because I had refused to accept a false version of my identity, because I had demanded to be seen and valued for who I truly was. The uniform I wore to work each day, scrubs instead of evening gowns, represented something far more important than social status. It represented a commitment to service, to healing, to using my skills and knowledge to make the world better. For the most vulnerable among us, Carmen had learned that hiding from truth ultimately diminishes everyone involved. I had learned that standing firm in authenticity, even when it's uncomfortable, ultimately creates space for deeper, more meaningful relationships. Some bonds are tested by deception and betrayal, but the strongest ones emerge from such trials, more resilient than before. Truth, I had discovered, was not just a moral imperative, but a practical necessity for any relationship built to last. Have you ever had to confront someone who misrepresented you to others, or found yourself tempted to hide parts of your identity to fit in? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. Remember that your authentic self is always worth defending, no matter the social pressure to be otherwise.